Hello everybody, Angel Gem here with Positive Gems Dog Training. We are in September, and September is actually Animal Pain Awareness Month. So I wanted to do a little short video on different physical signs and behavior changes that you might observe in your dog that could indicate that they are experiencing pain or some discomfort, and a few things that you should do if you do suspect that your dog is not as comfortable as they normally are. So some of the physical signs that you might notice is your dog might be panting, their breathing might not seem quite right considering what their activity is in the moment, or as you know, they're relaxing and it's a little bit faster as though they just came back from a walk. So that could tell you that there's some discomfort happening. They might be whining, whimpering, or even just making some weird, strange sounds that they don't usually make. When they're moving, their movement could be different, right? So if we think of their walking, the speed at which they're walking, if they're more, walking more slowly than they usually are, if they're limping, putting a little bit less pressure on certain paws. An obvious sign that most people recognize is when a dog is holding one of the paws up. Typically that means that there's some discomfort. Maybe they've hurt that paw itself, or even the shoulder, the leg, the muscles attached to that paw. The way they're sitting, the way they're standing, this might be something that we don't usually pay attention to, but if you notice that your dog is standing with the head kind of lower than it usually would be, or if they're sitting a little bit more funny in comparison to how they normally sit, that could tell you that there's something that's not comfortable in those positions. And of course, going in and out of those positions, if they're not comfortable, just like us, right? If we've got some back pain, obviously getting in and out of bed is going to be a lot more difficult. So same thing with our dogs. If they're more slow at going into the sit or getting up from a down, maybe they're needing to give themselves a little bit more of a boost. That could probably mean that it's more difficult for them. So why would that be? Maybe there's some pain happening, right? Going up and down stairs, jumping on and off of furniture. If your dog is more reluctant to do those things, consider what could physically be going on, making them kind of hold back on doing those behaviors. The placement of the tail and the ears. So obviously both of those on a dog could be extremely expressive and mean a lot of different things, but it could also indicate that there's something wrong physically with those body parts, or the body parts kind of attached there. So let's look at the tail first. Of course, the tail is attached to the spine. So if there's something going on in your dog's back, or the tail itself, or the back end, the tail might not wag as much or as quickly as it usually does. Maybe it's being held off to the side a little more than usual, maybe higher, lower. Those could all be signs that there's pain in the spine or in the tail itself. The ears are always fun. The ears are probably my favorite. So the ears, obvious one that most of us already recognize is if our dog is shaking their head a lot, or if they're scratching a lot at one ear, then usually that means that there's something going on with the ear infection, something. So definitely consider that as an important sign. But different things too, like how the ears are actually placed. So maybe you have a dog whose ears are usually standing on end, but they seem to be maybe a little bit more floppy than usual, or one is more than the other. And even you might notice that where they sit on the head seems a little bit off kilter. Um, so if the dog is experiencing some pain in that one particular ear, or even in the front half of their body, so if their shoulder on the one side, the leg itself, the muscles, the joints, whatever, that could actually affect how your dog holds its head, as well as the ears. So if the ears don't look like they're sitting quite where they usually do, consider that as an indication of some discomfort, pain, or issue going on there. Trembling, if it's not -40 outside, or even if it is and you have a breed that loves the winter, then that could mean that they're not comfortable. So be mindful of trembling as being a sign for pain. Going to the bathroom, their elimination, the stool, the urine itself, if there's a change in the consistency, the color, the smell, that can mean that there's something going on internally. It doesn't necessarily mean that there is pain, but if there's something not quite right, definitely we want to get that checked out. But when it comes to elimination, there's also the aspect of behavior change. So I'm kind of going to segue into that from here. When our dogs are not comfortable, often we will see behavior changes, and those behavior changes could be very subtle, and sometimes may not actually be considered as a symptom of pain. So I really want to jump into that and put some emphasis on some of these. So sticking with the elimination, you might have a dog who's been housebroken, for months or even years, and all of a sudden you're coming home to accidents, or all of a sudden your dog is eliminating right in front of you, or even you're just finding messes. Consider that as your dog is having a hard time holding themselves. So again, it might not necessarily indicate pain, but it could definitely mean that there's something physical or medically happening. So consider that. Their eating, drinking habits. They might be eating more or less than usual, or eating and drinking more or less than usual. Maybe they're even more picky than they usually are. Maybe they're not even taking treats. Okay. The energy level, again, one that we will often consider as being an indication of something wrong with our dog is if they're lethargic, obviously, but even just if they seem to be sleeping a little bit more than they typically would, or maybe they're sleeping in a little later than they usually are. Perhaps they don't like the idea of going for exercise. Maybe a dog that would normally absolutely love their walks are now balking at the idea of walking on a leash. Maybe they're holding back. They're bracing themselves like, no way, man, don't take me out. We are not doing this today. Maybe they're showing you frustration when normally they're walking normally. Maybe they decided they want to jump up at the leash or are biting at the leash. Maybe they're a little bit, maybe they're pulling more on the leash. The opposite could be happening too, right? They could be Again, how fast or how slowly they walk could be a sign, but if they are sticking really close to you, and usually they're very adventurous, maybe something's going on. When it comes to training, like I said earlier, maybe they're not taking treats, or maybe they're just not having this training. They're having a hard time doing some of the behaviors that you've been working with them. Obviously, the environment in which they're in could play a role, so consider if you're trying to work with your dog in a place where they haven't trained yet, or if the distractions are extremely high. If they're not wanting to train in those moments, that could simply mean that it's not the right environment for them. But otherwise, if it's where you usually play around with them and it's just not happening, maybe they're not comfortable. Maybe they're more cuddly than usual. And as great as that might be if you're somebody who's been wanting your dog to be more cuddly, consider that there could be something happening going on physically. Or maybe they're more restless. Maybe they're pacing a lot. They could be changing positions a lot. This is something you might not notice if they sleep when you're not home and tend to be more up and whatnot, or when you are home. But if you do, or if you are home and you're noticing that they just don't seem to want to lay down for a long period of time, or they're constantly moving, maybe they're not comfortable. Okay? One behavior change that is a little bit more severe, if you will, is, of course, reactivity. Now, anytime we talk about aggression, it's one of those topics that it could get uncomfortable talking about, or even, just thinking of the possibility of our dogs getting to that point. Might not be something that, oh no, my dog would never. But if your dog is really not comfortable, if your dog is experiencing a lot of discomfort or pain, you might start seeing some reactivity. So some of the more common ones would be when you go to touch your dog. Maybe they're turning towards your hand a little bit fast. Maybe they're even snapping. Perhaps they're growling when they don't usually. Some dogs will simply just become afraid of the touch and might cower when somebody's approaching, or even run away, or pull, the limb away, or try to protect themselves a little bit more. So that one is obviously, if your dog has gotten to that point, the severity of the pain, the discomfort, is probably quite elevated. So what do you do if your dog is in any, or experiencing any of this, and you suspect that they might not be comfortable? First and foremost, when they present to you, or present you with a behavior that they don't usually, please don't punish them. When we punish a behavior, especially if it stems in pain, then we can actually cause the reactivity to become even worse. So we definitely don't want that. Anytime, it doesn't matter what the behavior is, you want to try to avoid punishing. Consider it feedback. This is how your dog is telling you, hey, I don't get this, or this is too difficult for me today, or I really don't know what to do right now. If your dog does not respond the way they typically do, don't punish it. Don't punish it. They're talking to you. It's their way. It's their feedback. Okay. Most importantly, if you think your dog is experiencing pain, is physically unwell, or is uncomfortable, call your veterinarian. They will be able to check out your dog and determine what's going on physically. They'll be able to give you suggestions on how to help your dog. And now these are getting a lot more popular. Massage therapy for dogs, it's a thing. Physiotherapy, osteopathy, chiropractic care are all things to consider to help your dog be more healthy physically, and just different options that you can consider to help your dog be more comfortable in their everyday movements and their physical well-being. So that is it for me today. I hope that you found this informational. If you did, give me a like. Feel free to share the video with your friends, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.